Today I'm going to be talking with you all about some tips and tricks for starting project-based learning in your school, whole school, or doing a project-based learning unit as a school. So let me make this go away. Okay, there we go. So today, as I talk to you about that, you might be wondering why I'm talking to you about that. I am a certified PBL teacher with 6 years of project-based learning experience in a project-based learning school. I also coach teachers from around the world or around the country, just kind of talking with them about how to do project-based learning. Some of them are in environments where their whole building is doing that, and some of them are just doing it in their classroom. I have also participated in multiple building-wide PBLs. So these are just kind of some things that I've learned both through doing a unit as a school and from being part of an environment where project-based learning is whole building. So as I'm talking to you about that today, again, that's 5 tips for navigating school-wide project-based learning. As I'm talking to you about that, just a reminder, if you comment anytime during this live broadcast, you will receive a link to a free PBL resource. And that comment can be anything from a question that you maybe have for me to something like where you're from. Just any kind of comment, I'll private message you a link to a free PBL resource. And it is a good one today, guys. It's actually a resource that I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. I'm using a new platform. This is only the second time I've used it, so hopefully I can interact with you and make sure that this works. I'm really excited about it. And so today we're going to dive into 5 tips for navigating school-wide project-based learning. My first tip for you, sorry about that, is to build a strong building community. So when I say build a strong building community, what I'm talking about is going through a building and just getting that sense that everybody kind of works together, that each classroom isn't necessarily segmented, that the teachers collaborate well together. That's really important for building a community that really helps with project-based learning. Some things to think about when you're trying to build that kind of a community is maybe doing some kind of like a house system or something where students work together across grade levels. So if you are doing a PBL unit and not launching PBL as a whole school, then maybe doing something where you intermix your kids from different grades. The house system, if you are not familiar with it, kind of the idea like Harry Potter, where you have kids from different grades in different houses working towards a common goal, like whether that's a points or papers like that you get for like PBIS, whether you get like a reward paper if you do something well, and whichever group gets the most kind of thing. That's always really helpful in building a community. Another thing to think about is common language. So looking at PBL vocabulary and making sure that as your students go through each grade and each class that they're using the same kind of vocabulary if you're implementing school-wide PBL, so that my first grade students are calling the people that come in community partners, and my 6th grade students are calling those people community partners, and no one's calling them visitors. We're all referring to them as community partners, so that in each grade that language is familiar. This is important for a unit too, because then when you intermix your kids and they're talking about their project together, they're using that same common language. They're talking about their driving question that they've written as a building or that you've given them as a building, and they're calling it the driving question, because that's really an important thing. You don't want one student calling it their leading question and the other one the driving question, because then they'll get confused. And also just keeping, as you're talking about school-wide PBL implementation, thinking about grade to grade. So just as you make your decisions, as you're laying that foundation for building a PBL school, thinking about what it's going to be like for those students as they go into the next grade. So your kindergartners, what do they need to know to help them in PBL and in the PBL environment in first grade. Just making sure that when you're teaching them project-based learning, when you're laying that foundation in any grade, because we all get new students, when you're laying that PBL foundation, that you're keeping it in mind that they will be leaving you at the end of the academic year. So that goes back to common language and building that community, just keeping in mind the future of the project as well. Okay, moving on to the next one. Okay, so collaborating across classes. I think this is so important if you're doing a unit or you're implementing project-based learning as a whole school, to collaborate across your classes, meaning maybe my kindergartners and my fifth graders get together, and my kindergartners are doing a PBL unit right now where they want to make blankets for the local Humane Society's pets, but they're tying, and tying for kindergartners is so hard. It maybe takes us 20 minutes just to do 2 knots. So we ask the fifth graders to come. And maybe what we do is we read a book about pets to our fifth graders to practice their fluency while they're helping us tie knots. Or maybe those fifth graders are teaching us how to tie knots. Or maybe the fifth graders reading a book to us while we tie knots. Just getting interaction in there across grade levels so that students collaborate together. Another way to do that is the buddy system. So maybe my sixth graders always work with my kindergartners and my fifth graders always work with my first graders. If we do something like the buddy system, then every year students know that, oh, okay, well, I'm in first grade and this year I'm going to be working with fifth graders. Competitions. I'm not a super competitive person. I can sometimes get competitive about things, but most of the time it's not something that's really in my nature. But I know competitions are something that really help to encourage collaboration across classes. Maybe our buddy systems, our buddy teams are competing against each other. And so now, our sixth graders and our kindergartners are competing against those fifth graders and first graders to see who can raise the most cans for our local food bank or something like that. Sometimes that can really encourage collaboration because then they start to work together as teams, which can be fun. And then shared projects like we talked about. If you're doing a whole building PBL, thinking about that shared goal with miniature tasks inside of it. So let's say our building wants to have a garden for the whole building. What are some miniature tasks within that each class can take where we still have to collaborate to talk about it, but maybe our first graders are the ones planting all the pollinator plants and learning about pollinators, and maybe our fourth graders are using what they've learned about perimeter to build our beds, and maybe our sixth graders are building owl boxes because they've been researching owls, and bat boxes because they've been researching bats, and they're really getting in there with those tools and learning how to build those things. So just looking for those mini tasks within a larger project is going to be how you can really encourage that collaboration together. Because, through building bat boxes, now I'm also going to be talking with those first graders because, we're building bat boxes, but first graders are learning about bats because bats are pollinators. Just things like that, thinking about how you can bring those classes together, but also how they can be kind of in charge of their own mini part of a larger project. All right, my next item. Yay! Okay, find a mentor or a program. Now, what do I mean about that? So if you are doing, this is pretty much just for school-wide PBL. So if your building has decided that they all want to do PBL and we're going to launch project-based learning, maybe this coming semester, or maybe you're already in the midst of doing that, I really would encourage you to find a program, like a professional development program, or to find a mentor program where you can really get in touch with someone and get familiar with what project-based learning is, and get someone outside of your building, opinion on like what it is you could be doing differently, or what you're doing really well that you can build upon more. I think that it's important to keep growing as professionals too. So to get that professional development aspect in there, I think that there are a lot of great programs for that. I work for one called Magnifying Learning. I think they're amazing, and it's who I have my certificate through. There's a bunch of great facilitators that work for them. But there are a lot of programs out there that you could use. You could read a book together as a group. I personally recommend Hack Learning. I think that it's a great book. And there's resources for it too that you can use. There's a Facebook group for it. Lots of great resources for that book. And it's really, I feel like, great for elementary teachers specifically. But there are a lot of other resources that you can use. Do that book study, get partnered with a program like that. At the very least, I think it's important for your building to be meeting at least once a month. Ideally, you'd be meeting every other week, which I know is a lot. But I also feel like, if you're going to do PBL, when you have first started PBL, it is a lot. So that extra support can actually be really helpful and time well spent. So I would really recommend at least once a month getting together as a building and just kind of going through your projects together, doing some protocols, and really kind of looking at your projects and helping each other out. So maybe even partnering with mentors as you go further into project-based learning. You're going to find that you have teachers that have more PBL experience while you're getting new teachers in, and then partnering those two together as mentors. I was a mentor for a few teachers that came in, and that can be really helpful too, because then you're helping to answer questions. Let's see. Yes, I'm really passionate about this topic. I think I've only said like twice, which is really good for me. I don't know if you've watched very many of my other videos, but I tend to say a lot. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Communicating whole building is a really important thing too. Now, I know that you're thinking, well, we already communicate whole building, but let me talk with you specifically about some areas that are really important to talk about whole building if you are A, doing a PBL unit together, or B, implementing project-based learning as a whole. So let's talk about that. Oh, sorry. Okay. I think first, the thing that's really important to do when you're doing a PBL unit is to talk about the community outreach aspect. You don't want every grade level communicating with the same community partner. If there's one dietitian in your town, you don't want 6th grade levels calling that dietitian multiple times saying, hey, do you want to come in and talk with us about our Healthy Bodies PBL? Because you're going to burn out that community partner. So whether it's a Google Doc or something that you sign next to the copier, or the person in your building who's in charge of that, you want to make sure that you're communicating about that community outreach, those community partners that you're talking to, so that one person doesn't get bombarded multiple times. I think it's also important to communicate about where it is in your project you are, because as you're doing building-wide PBL, you're going to have people that are in different parts of the project at different times. So you might have somebody who's doing an entry event at the same time somebody's doing a culminating event. And I think that's really important to know as we're doing walkthroughs and helping each other. Where it is somebody's at in their project can really be a helpful tool to help you know if you have something that you could be doing to help them, or a resource that you could give them. So I think this is a really important tool. I actually have a product that I actually just made this week for this particular one. I'm going to try to share my screen. I haven't done this yet, so we'll see how it goes. But I'm going to try to share my screen to show you it. Oh, I can't do that. Okay, well, that's okay, because I took a picture just in case. So I'm going to show you this picture of what it looks like. And you can make this see if I can make this back now. Hey, sorry guys, I'm still navigating this whole thing. Okay, communicate whole building. I think it's a really important to resource share too. I think it's very important to resource share too, obviously within copyright laws, but I think it's important to make sure that if somebody is, teaching a PBL that's very similar to one that you taught last year, that you're giving them access to articles or recommendations and things, because, PBL is different year to year. So I think it's different to share resources year to year PBL, because your students may not necessarily have that same resource this year. So I think it's different than how sometimes you get nervous to share because you don't want students to have repeats of something before they come to you. But I honestly think that in PBL, it's a little bit different because your PBLs are different year to year. So just something to keep in mind is to be a little bit more open with your resources and sharing that, and letting people know too, if you have family members or friends that could really be helpful with their PBL unit. Maybe I'm very blessed to have a sister-in-law who's a dietitian, so I know that we used her once too. Just thinking about things like that when you're talking in your meetings as a school. Okay. And my last one today, yay, is keeping your caring adults in the loop. Now, I call them caring adults because I came from a school where a lot of people in the students' lives weren't necessarily parents. I'm sure many of you come from similar schools. But, parents, grandparents, whomever is the caring adult at home, keeping them in the loop. And you're probably reading this one going, well, duh. But I think that sometimes with project-based learning, we get so caught up in that project that sometimes we forget that parent communication aspect. And I think that in school-wide implementation, that can be really helpful for the teachers. That can help lift some of that burden. So as whether you're a building administrator or maybe you're the person in charge of communication, the newsletter for your building, maybe doing a video highlight of different project parts, or including a little blurb in your newsletter about a PBL unit that another grade did. Just little things like that. Communicating with them is really helpful. Now, I know that you've heard about literacy nights probably, and STEM nights where parents come in and you do literacy activities or you do STEM activities. I would encourage you to have a PBL night. Well, maybe one activity is we look at snapshots of the PBLs that we've done, and maybe another activity is we talk about jargon related to PBL that maybe parents really struggle with. Just different activities that you can do around PBL. Maybe as parents, we talk about the needs we see in the community and we write them on a big whiteboard for the students to look at and come in and see all of this need in our community so that they can feel empowered to come help us. Different things like that. So I would encourage you to have a PBL night for your parents, or maybe a showcase. So a showcase would be a little bit different than a PBL night, because a PBL night would be more with the intent to inform, whereas a showcase would be more for your students to show what it is that they've been doing at PBL. You could combine the two and do some informative aspects along with some showcase aspects. But I would really encourage you to make sure that you're including those parents, caring adults in your PBL experience as a school, whether you're just starting or you're doing a unit, just so that they are aware of what it is their students are talking about when they come back and they're talking about driving questions and needs to knows and culminating events. It can be kind of strange to hear your first grader say, well, on Friday, we're going to do our culminating event. So just kind of cluing them in. Okay, that is all for me. And I didn't see any comments. I'll give it a couple minutes, or not a couple minutes, but I'll give it a couple seconds. But I'm really excited to have talked about this with you. If there's anything that you know of that you would like for me to discuss at our next Facebook Live, please go ahead and leave it in the comments even during the rebroadcast, and I would be happy to talk about that. If there's something that I talked about during this video that you would like to know more about, or that you think you would like some resources for, feel free to either private message me or leave a comment. And as always, I'm really excited to be talking with you guys, and I'm excited for next week. So I'll see you then. Bye.